I'm pulling in my driveway. We all know what that means. It's time for the drive to work. And I've been talking all about Theros Beyond Death. Okay, so I'm up to red. I've previously talked about white, blue, and black. Okay, so we start with the Akroan War. 3 in red, so 4 mana total, 1 of which is red. It's an enchantment saga. As the saga enters the battlefield, as the saga enters and after your draw step, add a lore counter, sacrifice after Chapter 3. Chapter 1, gain control of target creature for as long as Akroan War remains on the battlefield. Chapter 2, until your next turn, creatures your opponent controls attack each combat if able. And then chapter number 3, each tapped creature deals damage to itself equal to its power. Okay, so first off, Akros is our version of Troy. So when we do like the Trojan War, instead of being like the Trojan horse, it was the Akroan horse. This is us doing our version of the Trojan War. The Trojan War was a big war seen in the Iliad and the Odysseys when he's returning home from anyway. So this is us trying to capture that sense of a war. The cool thing about this card is it plays in some space that's kind of unique to sagas. So for example, red gets temporary stealing. Now normally when red steals something, it steals it for the turn. But the sagas allow us to do stealing for not an infinite number of times, not forever, but for more than one turn. Because it comes out and it allows you to hold on to it. And essentially what happens is you play it, you get to steal something. And now notice that when you steal something, unless it has haste, you can't attack it because it doesn't grant. Oftentimes when you steal something, it also grants it haste. This is not also granting it haste, but because you hold on to it, the idea is turn 1 I steal it. Now if I steal a haste creature, I can attack with it. But assume it doesn't have haste, then turn 2, I get to attack with it. And then turn 3, I'm going to do damage to all tapped creatures. So number 1 is I gain control of the creature. Okay, so now I have control of the creature. Number 2, then my next turn, I force all your creatures to attack. And then on that turn, I can attack with this creature. I then force all your creatures to attack. And then the following turn, I'm going to have all tapped creatures do damage equal to themselves. Now I get to choose what I steal. As long as I steal something whose power is equal to or greater than their toughness, I'll get to attack with it once, and then it's going to destroy itself, assuming I pick the right creature. Also, since my opponent must attack with all their creatures are going to be tapped. So this is a pretty potent spell. Now notice, by the way, assuming you're not stealing a haste creature, you mostly have the creature for 1 turn. You get 1 attack with it, so that's not that different than the Thread or Red's normal stealing effect. It's a little bit different in that I steal and it happens next turn. I can block with it for a turn that doesn't normally happen. But anyway, it is, I think it's overall a pretty cool card. Next, Anax Hardened in the Forge. 1 red. It's a legendary enchantment creature. It's a demigod. And he is a star 3, and then his power is equal to his devotion to your devotion to red. And whenever Anax or another non-token creature you control dies, create a 1/1 red Satyr creature token with this can't block. If the creature had power 4 or greater, create 2 of those tokens instead. So the idea is I get a creature, so he is Anax has 2 red mana, so at bare minimum he's a 2/3. As long as you have 2 other red mana, so when any creature dies, including Anax, you're going to get a 1/1 red Satyr, and then if you have 4 more devotion, if the creature had 4 more power, if the creature who died had 4 more power, you get to create 2 tokens. So if you have devotion to 4, when Anax dies, you'll get 2 tokens. It doesn't. It only cares about the creature dying that determines whether you get 2, not whether he has devotion to red. The creature that dies has that. Now, if you have devotion to 4, then when Anax dies, you would get 2. Anyway, the idea is you're turning creatures into these satyrs. Now, notice the reason we can't block on them is one of the biggest problems with token generators is that you can use them to stall the battleground. And the idea is this wants you to be aggressive with them. It says, look, you can't use them for defensive purposes, so you might as well attack with them. Now maybe you'll hold off to attack with a whole bunch at once so you can swarm them, but you at least won't use it for defensive purposes, which is what often happens with creature tokens, especially with red. We want this to be more offensive than defensive. Again, this is part of the demigod cycle. As I said, some of them have devotion equal to their toughness equal to devotion, some is power. This one was power. It's red. It kind of makes sense its power is equal to it. Next, Arena Trickster. 3 in a red for a 3/3 human shaman, creature obviously. Whenever you cast your first spell during each opponent's turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Arena Trickster. I mentioned this during when I was talking about blue, that one of the things we did with the red-blue archetype for drafting is there's a play things on your opponent's spell flavor. Blue and red already are the spell colors, but to give them something a little different from other blue-red archetypes, this really records you for doing stuff on your opponent's turn. And this is one of the enablers. I talked about the blue enabler. This is one of the enablers that encourage you to have that behavior. Like I said, part of making those strategies work in an archetype is having some things that enable it and some things that reward it. I'm sorry, this is not enabler. This is a reward. This is a reward spell. So some things that enable you to do it allow, like for example, maybe there's more flash creatures or more instants. And then there's things that reward you for doing it, like this, where, hey, when you do it, you get some effect. So, hey, you want to do this, and encourages you to do that. Okay, next, Blood Aspirant. So Blood Aspirant costs 1 in a red, so 2 mana total, one of which is red. It's a 1/1. It's a Satyr Berserker. It's a creature, obviously. Whenever you sacrifice a permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on Blood Aspirant, and 1 in red, tap. Sack a creature or enchantment, Blood Aspirant deals 1 damage to target creature. That creature can't block this turn. Okay, there's a bunch going on here. One is, when we went back to Theros, we had a meeting of the Council of Colors to talk about enchantments and how all the colors interacted with enchantments. What colors like enchantments? What colors don't like enchantments? What colors can destroy enchantments? And one of the tricky things was, okay, well, what does red do in an enchantment-centered world? Well, red is not a color that can destroy enchantments. It's not a color, every color gets a little bit of likes enchantments, constellation stuff. But we really wanted red to have some identity. And one of the things we hadn't really identified was what was the color that might sacrifice enchantments. We don't want it to be black, because we don't want black to sacrifice its own enchantments, because we like making deal with the devil enchantments where you get yourself in trouble, and we don't want to make it easy for black to get rid of its own enchantments. We are allowing black to get rid of the opponent's enchantments, as I mentioned in black. But who would be the best? And we realized that we had an opportunity to define something in red. Now notice, red is not going to sacrifice enchantments all that often. It really only matters in a place where there's a lot of enchantments, like in an enchantment-centric deck. Enchantment-centric set. But anyway, we said that red could do that. Another thing that we did in this set is black and red. One of their, the deck archetype has to do with sacrificing resources, that I build stuff up and then I can sacrifice resources. So black is sacrificing creatures, red is sacrificing enchantments. It also gets to sacrifice creatures some, with this card. So this card, where normally in a normal set this would be sack a creature to deal 1 damage to a creature. In this set, it lets you sacrifice either a creature or an enchantment. The other thing we did here is the reward for sacrificing the creature is it gets bigger. That's good. But the other thing we also did is... notice, by the way, whenever you sacrifice, it doesn't care why you sacrifice. You don't have to sacrifice it to this effect. If you, for example, have one of the omens, which are, I talked about the enchantments that have an enter the battlefield effect that you can sack them to scry to. When you sacrifice that, you get to do this. If you have other creatures you're sacrificing for other means, for example, if you're playing a black-red deck where you have multiple things that can sacrifice, if other things are sacrificing, Blood Aspirant, like I said, it's a reward card. It still lets you care about that. Now, it gives you its own sack outlet, so it has its own way that it can get bigger, but it's open-ended so that it doesn't require its own effect to get bigger. Also, what we did is we did 1 damage to creatures. So the idea is that it helps you in combat and can help you kill small things. And it's a tap effect, so you can't combo and sacrifice multiple creatures to kill bigger things. The other thing we did is target creature can't block means, well, we want to give you some reason. Let's say there's nothing small in play. We still want to give you reasons you might want to make use of this. So, if I have small things I can kill, yeah, maybe I kill the small things or things that have a low toughness. But let's say my opponent doesn't have anything that I can kill. well, it still might be advantageous for me to use this to get through to be able to hit them. Maybe with the blood aspirant that's gotten really big. Okay, next, Dream Shaper Shaman. 5 in a red for a Minotaur Shaman. It's an enchant creature, 5/4. At the beginning of your end step, you may pay 2 in a red and sacrifice a non-land permanent. If you do, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-land permanent card. Put that card into the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. So one of the things, there's a card called Polymorph that was in blue in Mirage, I think, that takes a creature and turns it into another creature. We decided a while back that Polymorph feels pretty red. Polymorph, where you have complete lack of control, feels very red. Polymorph effects where you have some control feels more blue. So the idea is if I'm going to change you into something, if I know what I'm going to change you into, that's more blue. If I don't know what's going to happen, that is red. Now in this particular case, this is not about changing your opponent's stuff, it's about changing your things. And the idea here is you can sacrifice anything that isn't a land, and then you go get a permanent that isn't a land. And so the idea is it lets you change one thing into another. Because the reason it's very open-ended that says any permanent is, if we were very specific, you could put just one of that in your deck, and then you'd be guaranteed to turn whatever it is into that one thing. But the idea of not having any permanents is pretty hard to pull off. So by saying non-land permanent, okay, sacrifice something, you're going to go get something, but probably your deck has lots of non-land permanents in. So it's tricky to take advantage of that to control exactly what you're getting. The fun part of this is it lets you turn small things, like tokens or something, or small creatures that maybe aren't useful anymore, into bigger things. And so we felt this was pretty fun. And like I said, we're playing more in letting red do shape changing where you don't know the outcome, where there's a chaotic element to it, because that feels pretty red. Okay, next is Final Flare. So Final Flare is 2 and a red. It's an instant, so 3 mana total, 1 which is red. As an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice a creature or enchantment. Final Flare deals 5 damage to target creature. Now this is a great example where I talked before, we said red can sacrifice enchantments. So this spell we would make in a normal set, except it would just say creature. Like red, for example, Goblin Grenade. I mean, the mana cost was cheaper for Goblin Grenade. But Goblin Grenade, like sacrifice a creature, do 5 damage. And I think that might have been 5 damage to anything, not 5 damage to a creature. Anyway, that card's kind of strong. So in a normal set, we might let you do this with just creatures. But because we're in a world where, enchantments matter, we've decided red can sacrifice enchantments, it just lets us make a card in a slightly different version. You know, I mean, because you can sacrifice enchantment, maybe it costs 1 more than normal. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, it means something that you sacrifice enchantments. But it just gives you some more utility, and it lets us make a spell that's a little different than the spell might be in a normal set. It helps reinforce the flavor of the set and reinforce the theme. And so we always look at where and how to do that. Okay, Furious Rise, 2 and a red. So 3 mana total, 1 which is red. Enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card until you exile another card with Furious Rise. Okay, so this is us playing around a couple spaces. One is the idea of what we call impulsive draw. Is I get a card, I get it for a limited amount of time, and I have to cast it. Normally, impulsive draw is till end of turn. This is playing. We're messing around a little bit with impulsive draw, playing around a little different space. So the idea here is I get a card, and I get to keep it until. Let's see. Oh, I see. At my end step, so the idea is I can have 1 spell at a time. So if I have a spell, I'm allowed to keep that spell, but I can't get another spell. So this does let you keep the spell a little longer than normal, but because there's resource, because, look, you really want to be drawing a new spell every turn. It's advantageous to draw a spell every turn. So, yeah, it lets you keep a spell a little longer than 1 turn, but you're heavily, heavily encouraged not to do that. I mean, you're heavily encouraged to play them as fast as you can. So it reinforces and plays into general red space, but a little bit different. It also allows you, for example, if you get a reactor spell, that you can hold on to the reactor spell. I mean, your opponent gets to see what the spell is, so reactive up to a point, obviously. Another thing that I did not mention with Anax that I talked about earlier is notice it talks about power 4 or greater. That is a theme in red and green. So the red-green archetype has a 4 or greater theme in it. So all these cards work outside. I mean, you will have larger creatures in any deck, so it's not like you can't play this in a red deck with other colors. But green is going to ramp and going to have more big creatures, so it just plays more efficiently in a red or green deck. So that is why you see stuff like that. Okay, next, Infuriate. Red, instant. Target creature gets +3/+2 until end of turn. So one of the things that we had done for a long time was that red tended to have its giant growth be +N+O. +1+O, +2+O, +3+O. But what that meant was, well, it was very good for aggression. It never let you sort of be defensive or survive fights and stuff. And so we had a big powwow in that we want to make sure that red has some utility, but we also want to separate red from green and from some stuff from white. So we laid out a rule that you can see a place here, which is when red does boost, it's going to boost its power greater than its toughness. But because it's, in this case, granting +3 for power, it can go up to +2 for toughness. And so this is like a giant growth. Not quite as good as giant growth. It's not quite on the, like green gets +3/+3, red gets +3/+2. Okay, so it reinforces that red's not quite as good as green is, and it says red's a little more on the aggression. Not that you can't save things, +2 toughness is something, but it allows us to make a card. It allows us to play in space. Like, giant growth is fun space. We want to kind of play in that space. There's a reason that white and red and green all get to do stuff in that space. But we're trying to be careful about who does what where. White right now doesn't go above +2 on power. It tends to do smaller boosts. It is allowed to do a little more boost on toughness because it's a damage prevention color. Red, meanwhile, can go higher than 2, but it needs to have its power higher than toughness. Where green tends to be square statted. Whatever grants you, it tends to do +1/+1, +2/+2, +3/+3, +4/+4, tends to be square statted. This way we take something we want to do in a bunch of different colors, give each color some identity, so you get a feeling for that color. And that's important, that we want to make sure we differentiate. But look, giant growth is fun space. It's good gameplay. It leads to a lot of fun and interesting plays. So we really wanted it to be in 3 different colors in ways that we can chop it up. So if you see the spell in isolation, you can figure out who it is. White also, by the way, when it tends to do smaller boosts, but normally grants an ability with it. Where green, sometimes it grants trample, but other than trample, it usually just does +N+N. Okay, next, Iroha's Blessing, 3 in a red, enchantment aura. When Iroha's Blessing enters the battlefield, it deals 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1. A couple things. First off, Iroha is one of the gods. One of the things we did, even though we didn't make god cards for all 15 gods, although I should stress that Xenagos died and is no longer a god. Although we have a new red-green god, I'll get to him later. We did want to reference all 15 of the gods, so we made an effort between names and flavor text that even though there aren't god cards, hold on one second. Sorry, safety first. Even though there aren't 15 god cards, look, the gods do exist. We want the gods to be part of this world, so the gods are there. And so we wanted to make sure between names and flavor text that you get the sense that, yes, look, the gods still are part of this world. It's not like the gods don't exist. It's not as if just because we didn't print god cards, they're gone now. So one of the things we thought was really cool was, look, we wanted to make reference to the gods, so you will see the gods referenced throughout. Okay, another thing going on here is we want to make auras that matter. One of the problems in general with auras is card disadvantage. I've talked about that. So one of the ways to sort of help is to staple a spell to an aura. So for example, this is +1/+1. That's not that big a deal, but it's stapled to a damage spell, right? It allows you to do damage to a creature or a planeswalker. That's a very efficient spell. You might play that spell regardless. But the nice thing is it sort of allows you to play the spell, have answers to things, and have an extra enchantment in your deck. Since we care about enchantments, we want to care about them entering the battlefield and care about them leaving the battlefield and want you to sacrifice them and care if you have them. This allows us to just get extra enchantments into play. So that is beneficial. Okay, next, Phoenix of Ash. Phoenix of Ash costs 1 red, so 3 mana total, 2 which is red. It's a 2/2 Phoenix creature, obviously. Has flying and haste. For 2 and a red, Phoenix of Ash gets +2/+0 until end of turn. And escape, 2 red, exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. You may cast this from your graveyard for its escape cost. Phoenix of Ash escapes with a +1/+1 counter on it. Okay, so for 3 mana, I get a 2/2 flying haste creature. And I can, for 2 and a red mana, +2/+0 fire breathing. The reason we tend to do that is if we make fire breathing for a single red mana, it encourages you to have lots of red mana. This particular card, it has 2 red mana in its mana cost. It was a little less necessary to do that. And if you want to play this with another color, it makes it a little easier to do that, although I understand the mana cost is the thing that adjusts as well. Anyway, it's a 2/2. You get to escape with it. It's a Phoenix. Phoenix is naturally going to come back from the dead. That's what Phoenixes do. It's kind of fun to, since there's a mechanic that plays into that very flavor. Hey, let's make a Phoenix that does that. Phoenixes clearly come back from the dead. Is what Phoenixes do. This particular one also does the thing where it gets better when it comes back from the dead. So it's a 2/2 normally, but it's a 3/3 when it rises from the dead. Getting it back is not much more expensive. Like 1 red for a 2/2, and then 2 red for a 3/3. So you're not paying that much more to get it. So that is kind of cool. Okay, next. Perforos, Bronze Blooded, 4 and a red. It's a legendary enchantment creature, God, 7/6, indestructible. As long as your devotion to red is less than 5, Perforos isn't a creature. Other creatures you control have haste. 2 and a red. You may put a creature card or an artifact card from your hand onto the battlefield. Sacrifice at the beginning of your next end step. Okay, so he does 2 things besides being a god. Is he grants everybody haste. So I think all the gods in this case have a static ability and activate ability, I think, or maybe it's activated or triggered. And he is the forger. So the reason it says creature or artifact is a little bit of flavor. So basically he's doing, what's the name of the effect? Sneak Attack from Tempest. I made Sneak Attack all the way back in Tempest. So what Sneak Attack does is it lets you put a creature card on your hand into play, gives it haste, and then it goes away at end of turn. So it allows you to turn your creatures into like one-time effects. So he has Sneak Attack built in, which is pretty powerful. It's funny, he also, because he grants everybody haste, his Sneak Attack ability doesn't need to grant them haste because he grants them haste, which is kind of clever. So we sort of took that ability and split them off. We've made Fervor and a lot of stuff where red grants haste. That's kind of a generally cool ability to have. So anyway, he all comes together pretty cool. Perforos' Intervention, X and red. So sorcery, choose 1. Create an XX red elemental creature token with trample and haste. Sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step. So you got to make a whole bunch of 1/1s that with trample that can attack for this turn. I'm sorry, they're X1. Oh, create an X1. It's not X11s. It's an X1. So I'm creating 1 creature token, but it's got trample based on X. So I'm going to attack you with, if I put 5 mana into it, it's or 5 in red. It's a 5/1 trample. And I'm going to attack with it because it's going to die at end of turn. And Perforos' Intervention deals X damage to target creature or planeswalker. So either, once again, we've done this before, where I can do X of something, which is making an X1. Or I can do double X, where I can do damage to creatures or planeswalkers. So the cool thing about this is, hey, if I want to do damage to a player, I can make a creature with trample and attack. If I want to do damage to a planeswalker or a creature, now do I get to do that, but I get a double up. I get to do double X. Like I said, a bunch of these X spells do double X, so it helps us make 2 different effects that both fit the same cost. But anyway, that's part of the red. Red's part of the, what do they call it? The intervention cycle. Okay, next. Scoferos Maze Warden, 3 and a red. It's a 3/4 creature, a Minotaur Warden. 1: Scoferos Maze Warden gets +1/-1 until end of turn. So it's a 3/4. You can pump it all the way up to being a 6/1. Whenever another creature becomes a target, and if you put enchantments or something on it, make bigger. Whenever another creature becomes the target of an ability of a land you control named Labyrinth of Scophos, you may have Scoferos Maze fight that creature. So the idea is there's a land that represents the maze, and this is the Minotaur in the maze, which is playing into the original Greek, like in a Greek mythology, there actually is 1 Minotaur. There's not a lot of Minotaurs. We make a lot of Minotaurs. In original Greek mythology, there was the Minotaur. There was only 1, and it guarded the maze. I think Theseus fought him. Anyway, there's a combo here where this card by itself is a fine card. It's a 3/4 with sort of flowstone, we call it in R&D. I don't know what the +1/-1. But if you can get the maze, then not only that, they combo together, and now the Minotaur can fight things in the maze. So there's lots of fun flavor there. Okay, next, Storm Herald, 2 and a red, creature, human shaman. It's got haste, and it's a 3/2. It's a creature. Human shaman is a creature. When Storm Herald enters the battlefield, return any number of aura cards from your graveyard to the battlefield attached to creatures you control. Exile those auras at the beginning of your next end step. If those auras will leave the battlefield, exile them instead of putting them anywhere else. So one of the things red gets to do is do things temporarily. So here what it's doing is it's raising dead all your auras for a turn. Now remember, we said that red gets to sacrifice auras. So one of the things it could do is it could have auras. Maybe it has enchantment creatures. Although this only gets back auras. Maybe you have auras that you're putting on your creatures. Like I said, there's stuff like the one that does damage to creatures that maybe you're just playing. But anyway, you get to play some auras. You get to sacrifice them, and then this lets you get them back and do. I think this is intended for a more build around if you want to make an aura-centric deck. The idea being that I play a lot of auras, and then this card really lets me sort of have a second hit with all the auras in. And it's kind of neat. We've done, animated creature for a turn in red, but this is the first time we've done animate auras. And to make it powerful enough, it's all the auras, so that's kind of cool. Okay. Next, Storm Wrath. So Storm Wrath costs 2 red, so it's 4 mana total, 2 of which is red. It's a sorcery. It deals 4 damage to each creature in each planeswalker. So it's a board wipe for red, or a pseudo board wipe. I mean, it only does 4 damage, so it might not kill all planeswalkers, although a lot of planeswalkers that might be at 4 or less, or at least lower the planeswalkers. And it gets rid of at least all these small and medium-sized things. But usually when white does sort of mass, it just destroys them, where red and black usually care a little bit about how big they are. Black a lot of times will do -X, and red will do direct damage, obviously, because that's what red likes to do. Okay, next, the Triumph of Anax. 2 in red, it's an enchantment saga. As it enters, you get lore counter, and this has 4 chapters, so you sacrifice after chapter 4. Chapter 1, Chapter 2, and Chapter 3, until end of turn, target creature gains trample and gets +X/+0, where X is the number of lore counters on Triumph of Anax. And Chapter 4, target creature you control fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. So the idea is Anax is one of our demigods, so it's telling a story about them. So this is playing some fun space with sagas. The idea that it could be a ramping effect, because yes, Chapter 1, 2, and 3 are the same effect, but really they're not the same effect, because it cares how many lore counters you have. So essentially it's +1/+0, +2/+0, +3/+0. So it's kind of neat in that while the chapters repeat, they scale up. And that is something that we can do with sagas. Sagas are definitely something that we enjoyed within Dominaria. We had fun bringing them back. You can see we're playing around with them a bit. Some of them, like this one, have 4 chapters. All the ones in Dominaria had 3 chapters. And we're experimenting a little bit with what you can do with sagas. This is a good example of some space that is interesting space that sagas let you do in a clean way, where you get to have scaling effects, but in a way that's not like you're already doing the logistics to have to track the lore counters anyway. So it's no additional... like if I did this on a normal spell, I have to explain to you how to track it. But since I already have something that has to track something, I can sort of make use of that. So it's a neat way to get extra value without creating extra logistics. So that is particularly cool. Okay, Underworld Breach. So Underworld Breach costs 1 in red. It's an enchantment. Each non-land card in your graveyard has escape. The escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost plus the exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. At the beginning of your end step, sacrifice Underworld Breach. Okay, so first off, this is kind of like a spell in that you get it for the turn. It's very Yawgmoth's Will-y, for those that know that card from way back when. A black card from Urza's Saga that is super powerful. And the idea here is that it allows you to escape things, meaning it grants escape to everything. So essentially the idea is, for the cost of 3 cards from your graveyard, you can cast stuff out of your graveyard. Yawgmoth's Will just let you, for the turn, casting out of the graveyard. So this is like that, except there's the added cost of you have to spend 3 cards per spell. So it doesn't let you get every spell, but oftentimes you can't cast all the spells anyway when you're casting stuff out of your graveyard, because you only have so much mana. Anyway, this is a very powerful card. I anticipate seeing play in many formats. Like I said, it's kind of Red's version of Yawgmoth's Will. Not quite as strong as Yawgmoth's Will, obviously. While it costs the same as Yawgmoth's Will, the escape element of having to sacrifice 3 other cards really is a significant cost. Okay, so finally, I think it's my last card in red. It is. Wrap in Flames. Okay, Wrap in Flames is 3 in a red. It's a sorcery. Wrap in Flames deals 1 damage to each of up to 3 target creatures. Those creatures can't block this turn. Okay, so this is space that we've been playing in a little bit more in red, is the idea of, we like red having panic effects, meaning target creature can't block. But sometimes it's hard to play those spells. Unless you're playing super aggro-y sometimes, it's tricky to to have the space in your deck for that. So the idea here is, we've been doing this a little bit more, is the idea of doing a damage to a creature, and so if I'm able to kill it, I can kill it, but if not, it can't block. So the idea is that as utility against small things, it kills the small things, but as utility against bigger things. So the idea is, I'll put it in my deck because it lets me deal with tokens or deal with smaller things, but if I get in a situation where I'm not able to use it still lets me break through. So it's pretty flexible. And the idea is kind of fun, is that if I hit you, maybe it's not enough to kill you, but hey, it discourages you from blocking me. So I think that's pretty cool. Anyway, I'm now at work, so I just got the red today. So obviously there'll be some more podcasts coming, but I'm at work, so we all know what that means. It means it's the end of my drive to work. So instead of talking magic, it's time for me to be making magic. I'll see you guys all next time. Bye bye.